Hi everyone, today I'm going to be showing you some examples of how couture sewing techniques are different from ready-to-wear. This is a follow-up to my video about haute couture and how it's different from home sewing and industrial sewing, so check that one out if you haven't already. I'm going to start by talking about darts. Darts are these little triangles of fabric which look like a straight line on the outside of a piece of clothing that give a garment shape. If it weren't for darts, we'd all be wearing shapeless sacks that would be wide enough to fit the widest part of our bodies, but would be way too baggy everywhere else. Of course, if you're working with stretchy fabrics, that's a bit different. Darts aren't always as necessary, but for non-stretch garments, they are very important. In ready-to-wear, basically the little triangle of fabric is sewn, it gets pressed to one side, and the dart point gets pressed open to get that round shape, and that's pretty much it. Sometimes you may see the dart on the inside of the garment, other times you might not if it has a lining. Now that's not quite fancy enough for haute couture. I'm going to show you on a skirt that I made when I was briefly studying haute couture sewing in fashion school before I realized that couture sewing is way too tedious for me and I dropped out. Now see how on this dart there are two triangles, one on each side instead of just the one? That's what's called a double dart or a balanced dart. Mine is quite ugly because it's the first project I ever made in fashion school. Sorry about that. Here's a photo from Tilly and the Buttons of a double dart that actually looks nice. When done well, not only is this an aesthetically pleasing option, but it also balances out the dart excess so that it's less bulky. In order to do this, before sewing your dart, you insert a rectangle of fabric that's wider than the dart underneath. Then you sew the dart, including the rectangle underneath. Then you flip the rectangle of fabric in half along the dart lines and press it so that there are two layers, and then you cut the layers so that they're as wide as the dart, and then cut away the rest of the rectangle so that it's just the double dart. Finally, you'd press and then do a hand stitch like a blanket stitch or hand overcasting to join these two layers of fabric on the fake extra dart together. I've linked videos on both of those stitches in the description. So that's an example of one way that haute couture sewing and ready-to-wear are different. Now, I have never worked in an haute couture atelier, nor have I ever seen a true haute couture garment from one of the haute couture houses, so I can't guarantee that this is how it would be done. Furthermore, each haute couture house has different codes and different ways of dealing with garment construction, so take what I say in this video as more of a snapshot of general differences and not as an authoritative source on how things are done in haute couture. Let's move on to talk about linings, specifically jacket linings. Now, in most store-bought jackets or blazers, whether that's fast fashion or something a little higher end, they all kind of follow the same process. The lining is attached to the shell at the hem, at the sleeves, and along the neckline facing, and using these little tag thingies, which like in a higher end tailoring situation, it would be tacked by hand, I would imagine, and there wouldn't be these little tags. And in the lining sleeve, there is a several inch long gap that is not sewn. So then the lining gets bagged, which means you pull the jacket right side out through the hole in the sleeve. And then the sleeve hole would get sewn up at the end. Now in very high-end ready-to-wear, there might be more hand sewing involved, and in a custom tailored jacket made by a tailoring shop, there would be as well. But what I just described is a pretty common way that brands make lined jackets. Now, I'm pretty sure that in haute couture, you would never bag a lining of a jacket like this under any circumstance. There are probably a variety of ways that an haute couture house would handle the lining of a jacket, but one way that I find particularly intriguing is the classic Chanel quilted cardigan jacket. I borrowed a book from the library by Claire Schaefer. It's called Couture Sewing, the Couture Cardigan Jacket. Her books are absolutely fantastic. Check them out if you want to learn more about how haute couture garments are made and how to replicate the techniques at home. I'm not going to go into detail about the techniques that she describes in the book because I think it's best if you read it firsthand from her or watch the DVD that comes with the book if you have a device that can play DVDs. But I will very briefly describe how the lining gets attached to the outer fabric. Essentially, it involves quilting the lining and the outer fabric together, piece by piece, and then attaching all the pieces together. So this is a vast oversimplification of the techniques described in Claire's book, but let's pretend that these squares of fabric are the outer jacket fabric of a ready-to-wear jacket, and these squares are the lining. Similarly, we'll pretend that these squares are the outer fabric and lining fabric of an haute couture cardigan jacket that have been quilted together. Now, in real life, obviously these pieces would be bodice pattern pieces, and also the quilting would not be these ugly squares that I sewed, but nobody's paying me to make these videos, so this is as good as it's going to get for now. In a ready-to-wear jacket, the outer fabric would be sewn together, the lining would be sewn together, and then you would sew the lining to the outer fabric. In the Haute Couture cardigan jacket, these pieces are quilted together already. So you sew the seam of the outer fabric. If I'm not mistaken, I believe in her book Claire said that it would be sewn by machine. Contrary to popular belief, not absolutely everything is done by hand in an Haute Couture atelier. They do have machines. And then, this is the part that totally blows my mind, you sew the pieces of the lining together by hand after you've assembled the outer pieces of the garment. How wild is that? You can either use a slip stitch, which I'm kind of showing on screen, although all of my hand stitches kind of look the same, so I don't know if this is actually a proper slip stitch. And there's another way of doing it too that Claire describes in her book called the lapped lining. I just think that is so cool. Now, this was not an apples to apples comparison because what I showed you for the ready-to-wear earlier was a blazer, and what I talked about for Haute Couture was a quilted jacket. What I want to convey here though is that Haute Couture is truly next level when it comes to handling linings, regardless of the type of garment. As you can see, ready-to-wear and Haute Couture have different goals. In ready-to-wear, it's creating a high-quality product, or at least the highest quality product that your budget permits, and doing so in the most efficient way possible, which is what allows you to remain in budget. Whereas in Haute Couture, there is no budget. That's kind of the point. It's about technical exactitude at every step of the way, precision, and paying attention to all the little details to make a garment flawless. Definitely check out Claire Schaefer's books if you want to learn more about the magic of Haute Couture. I would highly recommend them. Claire also has a YouTube channel. I've linked it in the description. Please go check it out and subscribe to her. She is so knowledgeable about all things Haute Couture and sewing in general. I'd really highly recommend it. I would one day love to make a video where I buy a real Haute Couture garment, definitely secondhand, and I analyze it on camera. If you'd like to help me achieve that dream, pretty please like this video and subscribe. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.